everyone and welcome. I'm Rashi Sen, editor of Travel and Tourism News Middle East, and I'm very excited to be here today with Sir Tim Clark, President of Emirates, to formally present them with the World Travel Leaders Award and hear more about the reasons for this recognition.
So Rashi, thank you very much for this interview this morning. I'm looking forward to your questions, and I hope I can be as forthright and candid as I normally am in my answers.
Congratulations to Emirates and to you, Sir Tim, and thank you so much for being here to accept this award. Emirates is obviously no stranger to awards and recognition, but the first and foremost reason we at TTN nominated Emirates for the World Travel Leaders Award is the world first free COVID-19 cover provided by the airline. So if we could begin there, if you could tell us a bit more about what's been the response to the COVID-19 insurance, and do you see this becoming an industry norm going forward?
Well, I think it kind of unlocked a lot of the business that was concerned about the risk that they might have run when they travelled. So we tried to mitigate that by introducing this free of charge insurance for COVID. Interestingly enough, the take-up was quite high, so we've now expanded it to not only COVID but to medical insurance in general. So we will shortly be launching a new range of products, suite of products to do with covering all of those things, not just COVID. And we will absorb that in the fares. So you can imagine that that does alleviate the concerns people may have, but doesn't eliminate the concerns entirely.
Do you see this becoming an industry norm? Do you see people around the world, maybe airlines or even destinations around the world, picking this up as something which is something they should be doing?
Well, so long as this situation exists, there are going to be many people who are facing all sorts of restrictions, inhibitors on travel. But this is just one of those, and the more you do on that, and that covers the range of suite of products that we offer, not just insurance, but of course of in-flight protocols, health, hygiene, all the other things that we've been working so hard at. But if you can gradually eliminate the concerns people have in many ways and restore confidence, consumer demand will come back. So it's pointless trying to hope that things will be done for you in other areas. You've got to take the bull by the horns and do it yourself. This is what the team has done here in Emirates. They've realised that we have to help ourselves. There aren't going to be many people out there really helping us in getting the airline back into some degree of normality.
Great. So, soon, of course, soon Emirates is going to hit the 100 destination mark again. So we had a few questions around how this happens. What factors go into deciding which existing routes need to be activated first? How long does it take, for you to figure out this is the route that needs to start? So when should, and between making it commercially viable, how long does it take? What's the process like?
Well, last week we actually hit 104 destinations. So we've gone through the 100 mark. I guess for us, there were certain things playing out in our favour, given that most of the airline industry was in a terrible state, and it remains in a terrible state. I think the fact that we have a fleet of 777-300ERs, which are hugely potent freighters, if you like, they have great underfloor volumetric and payload capability. So we rapidly deployed those to meet the cargo demand, which had been severely crippled for a number of reasons, but not the least of which, that as international carriage disappeared, the airline stopped operating. So the cargo business was left, dare I say, high and dry. So we activated the fleet very early on, in probably late March, converted many of the aircraft into all freighter operations. Each of these aircraft can carry 40 tons. Latterly, as some other countries that had hitherto been completely locked down, I'm talking about April, probably the back end of April, beginning of May, began to open up. So we were able to do a number of things, and this happened actually in early April, mid-April. We started repatriating many people who had been caught out. The government in the UAE gave us, and Dubai gave us permission to start operating repatriation charters. But we also used those to start the whole freight movement. And gradually, the freight imperative drove the activation of large numbers of our fleet. As many as 100 777-300ERs, plus our freighter fleet, were operating cargo. And the yields were very strong, much stronger than they've ever been. Demand was very high. And by slipping in passengers on the upper deck, we were able to improve significantly the economics of the whole operation, not mitigating the complete situation in terms of the fixed costs that we face as a result of things like 380 sitting on the ground. So the more we explored the cargo opportunity, the more we realized the centrality of our network. And don't forget the parcel operators, FedEx, UPS, and a few others continue to operate significant frequencies in and out of Dubai, and we were able to feed them and feed us. So with our network expanding into Africa, Europe, Asia, to an extent South America and North America, so we were able to move passengers onto that. So in answer to the question, I guess it was the freight imperative that allowed us to open up, and the more countries began to relax their rules, I mean that is, I caution the word relax, because it really isn't a relaxed set of rules in many of the countries overseas, but never mind, where we can, we move fairly quickly to try and optimize the revenue on the fleet. So far, so good. And as freight picks up even more, as it will do when the vaccine comes out, we will be there to respond as quickly as we have done in the past.
Hey, what destinations do you have in mind for Q1? Which destinations are Q1 2021 and Q4 by the end of this year? Which destinations are you expecting to?
It's difficult to say. I have to say that there are some freight destinations which we've never had on the network before. There may be some more of those coming up. We're doing very bespoke operations, meeting the demands of countries or entities to move stuff around. There are certain no-go areas to us at the moment, such as Oceania, that's Australia, New Zealand. But we're hoping that we'll get, perhaps a greater presence in the United States. Later on, we're hoping that we'll get more into India. And where Africa, we have just started moving fairly quickly, primarily into Southern Africa. And we're hoping, and we're starting Harare very soon as well, along with Zambia as well. So things are moving, and we'll continue to do that so long as we can.
Great, that's great to know. What's been the impact of the pandemic on Emirates' medium-term and long-term plans in terms of network, fleet, and revenue? How have you been set back?
Well, of course, like everybody else, being an international long-haul network carrier, essentially, to have all our markets shut down on us, and inclusive, we were shut down for a few weeks, don't forget, and we just couldn't fly even though we wanted to. The effect has been devastating, let's be quite honest, but we are no different to anybody else. I guess that the kind of can-do ethos in Emirates was not to take this lying down, not to sit idly by. We were really seriously looking at getting the fleet activated as quickly as possible. A problem child for us was the 380 at the time, but we are optimistic that is going to be sorted out during the course of 21. So in the short term, we took a major, I could say, bashing, I suppose. The financials, of course, were hit very badly. But we have restored the income stream probably to about 15-20% of where it was before. We've taken a lot of costs out of the business, as you probably know, as every airline has done. And I am cautiously optimistic that once we get through this, I'm not one of these people who believes that this is the end game for the airline industry, certainly not. However, I will say that the longer this goes on, the worse it becomes in the structural effects it has on the GDPs of many economies. The G7 is likely to take a 20 to 30% hit as a result of this, but if this continues during the course of 2021 without a vaccine which has a high degree of efficacy, we could be in a spot of bother globally. My view is that will be conditioned by the success of the vaccine in its efficacy and its distribution. And I hope that we find a fair and equitable way of distributing the vaccines across all the markets and the countries that we serve, but also everybody else should get a fair crack at the whip, so to speak, get access to it without too many intermediaries monetizing the whole thing. It's really in the best interests of the global economy and all the key players who run the governments that they should get this vaccine out sooner rather than later in a manner that is affordable for everybody, not just the West, but in the third developing world, because it is the developing world that in many respects needs their vaccine more than anybody else, because they don't have access to the kind of healthcare and therapeutics and interventions that the West has, and we must get some kind of equilibrium in that, and people have to understand that. This is vital to getting the global economy up and running again. In terms of the plans, I'm a believer that this will come out during the first quarter of 21. Some are out already, and that there will be hopefully a rapid take-up, and that the air industry, cargo and others will be able to service the needs of the countries that need these vaccines desperately.
Great, thank you. So what else can governments and airline organizations do to help out in this situation?
Well, at the moment, for the last 6-7 months, multiple organizations have been trying to address the primary inhibitors to this, put aside the vaccine. Of course, on the medical side, there are, as I said, the therapeutics have been developed, the techniques have improved considerably since March and April in the early days. But nevertheless, the pandemic has come back as many thought it would in Europe and more recently in China and others. So we're going to have to deal with that. The governments are trying to introduce kind of track and trace. They're trying to introduce testing regimes, but they all disagree. They never see, there isn't one solution that fits the problem. There are multiple, and one moment you've got Public Health England saying something, then you've got maybe Singapore saying another, and then the US doing something else. So the biggest problem is a universal set of protocols that deal with track and trace, that deal with testing, with the levels of efficacy that everybody's happy with the results turned around as quickly as they can. But for me, more importantly, it's when we get through this and the vaccine is promulgated on a global basis, there is going to be, in my view, some kind of protocol requirement for people to evidence that they've had the vaccine or have the vaccine. And this will be a universal door opener, not only for the airline business, but for hospitality and everything else. If we are going to restore confidence, consumer confidence, in all the segments of the global economy, and remember, so many of the Western economies are now service economies, which are hit by as much as 80% on GDPs as a result of that. Manufacturing is all about factories, and they are distant from the market. But so if people are going to be able to interact and they have the vaccine and they can evidence that they have the vaccine, I think this is going to be something that all the governments of the planet have got to come together and sort out. I hope it doesn't become a political animal, politicizing this kind of thing on the basis of what I said earlier about fairness, and the equitable distribution of the vaccine cannot be retarded or inhibited by woolly thinking. Basically, I would think that the World Health Organization, which is a kind of universal body which is accepted in the medical field and governmental side of things, should take the lead on this. And notwithstanding whether the vaccine is Russian or Chinese or American or British or whatever, if they stand up to the rigors of scientific study and medical application, and I use that with a view to making absolutely sure that we're doing the right thing with this vaccine, then I think this is one of the biggest single problems they must get on top. Because it does, and it has a high level of efficacy, and everybody believes that, then we'll start this global economy moving very rapidly.
Great, thanks. I'm just going to take the conversation a bit away to travel agents and tour operators. And where do you see the future of ticket selling and distribution going, the future of travel agencies, if I may ask?
Well, I look for me the pandemic is a huge disruption, but it is a disruption, and by that I mean it's not a permanent thing. We will restore and recapture the way we were doing things. In other words, if you roll back to 19 and before that, there was already a large move driven by the digital world that we're now living in, and the exponential growth in all those and how they apply to entities and the products that they sell, not just in travel, but everywhere else, whether it be retail, whether it be banking, financial services, etc. We will recapture that move, and it will continue to move apace. And we can see during the course of the pandemic how these technical solution companies, the Googles and the Microsoft, have all, and Amazons, etc., have done really well as people are now falling back more on the digital economy, perhaps than they would have done past. So do I see this accelerate? Yes, I do. Is there a place for the travel agent? Online, of course there is. There may be a smarter way of doing it, but we were getting there anyway. People were moving fairly quickly, and there were whole suites of products coming to people like the airlines, the hospitality sectors, driven by the online. That's not going to change. And it's a question of adaptation and adapting to the requirements of the modern online consumer, and understanding through this sort of personalization process more about what drives the individual, and importantly, drives the decisions that they take with regard to the choices that they can make. So it's those that think that the pandemic is going to arrest the rate of change. No, that's wrong. It might give them some time to think about it. It may be that people actually get more time on their hands. We're seeing evidence with working at home. Productivity is actually rising because you don't have travel. People are sitting in front of screens. They're doing a bit more. They're actually working at weekends because they're used to it. And therefore, the ability to interact with people in the online world is probably greater than it was. And therefore, you have a choice, a chance to present your products in the online world, and that goes for the travel trade as well, in a manner that accepts the B2C change out in the way we go about distribution. But at the same time, for the travel business, the online travel agencies also have a huge opportunity if they understand the way things will have changed as a result of this.
Great. On the other side, if I could ask a question about airlines, how many airlines do you think would go bust this year or in the next few months due to the pandemic?
Well, it's a difficult one to say. The airline industry is clearly in trouble. The great and the good have had to resort to the debt markets or to the governments for bailouts or their shareholders. It's not surprising. It's unsustainable for any business model to have no passengers on board the aeroplanes. Whoever thinks otherwise and suggests, oh, isn't this a bit strange that airlines are going bust or really struggling, needs their heads examined. It's a highly capital-intensive industry. We have enormous fixed costs, and the notion that we would stop operating effectively for 6-9 months or even a year is an anathema to anybody who thinks smartly about the way airline businesses are run. It is surprising to me that so many are still here. I know many have gone. If this continues, there will be some casualties. I'm not going to name names. I remember a couple of years ago, well before this happened, saying that there would be a number of failures around the periphery of the core, and that's exactly what has happened. There are some airlines that shouldn't be here, pandemic or no pandemic. They are, and it is pointless trying to keep those alive. They might as well just be allowed to disappear as any normal business would do. And again, much will depend on how long this continues. I think a lot of airlines believe that in the winter of this year, the pandemic would be behind us and would have diminished, and rather calculated everything on the basis of a 6-month shutdown. Well, clearly that's not happening, and they're having to return to the debt providers or the bailouts, etc. Once again, we see that in the US, we see that in Europe. And as I said, the longer this goes on, the worse it becomes. There are going to be some carriers that will not be able to sustain that. More the carriers in the private area, which don't have recourse to government bailouts, although some governments are recognizing that they need to do that even in the private sector. And I believe that will be done on the basis that they will be anxious to repay this debt as quickly as they can get going again to relieve themselves of the burden of having government intervention, certainly at board level and everything else. But if we're still having this, if we have this discussion this time next year, well, I don't know how many will be around. Difficult to say. Not many.
Well, thank you so much. I'm down to my last question, which is, what are the 3 most important things you think would be required, need to be addressed in our region in the next 12 months? This is a question they're asking everyone. So,
well, it's look, we have a number of things going on, not the least of which is the new arrangement that the United Arab Emirates has with Israel. And the opening up of the Israeli flights from both the Israeli carriers and the carriers in the UAE will be, I think, a bit of a game changer. It's a hugely prolific market, and I'm hoping that it'll work well for us. Obviously, so that is a major change out for what is going on here. That's something we will be looking forward to activate whichever way we can. I guess we've talked at length about what needs to be addressed with regard to how we go about the pandemic. One hopes that there will be a degree of equilibrium along the basis of the vaccine, as I've said, and that the GCC countries and countries around us will be open far more than they have been in the past as a result of and a restoration of normality during the course of 21 is absolutely essential, not just for the airlines, but for the economies. And I'm optimistic that fuel and the cost of fuel into our aircraft and everybody else's aircraft will remain in the region of $40 during the course of 21, which means that interplane it costs us 110 cents, which allows us to operate the aircraft very economically, bearing in mind that we will probably defer some of our orders for the newer, more fuel-efficient aircraft until such time as we're ready to take those on. So I think with demand restoring itself, and I'm hoping that it'll come bouncing back. I'm not one of these people who think this is going to be going along, bobbing along at the bottom of the trough. No, I think vaccine will come along and then you'll see a big bounce back. So I'm hoping that the region will respond to that. I think they will. There is a sea change of thinking in the Middle East as to how they go about their business. So, I'm fairly optimistic that there are no real impediments to what we're trying to do. I hope that the West Asian markets, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, all restore themselves to the way they were. The Indian economy was moving ahead at a great pace prior to this, and therein lies huge potential, and so on and so forth. So we'll see.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for accepting this award. It's an honor to be here in the same Zoom call as you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and also thank you very much for the award. I'll speak to the team in the next couple of days and hold the award up and show them that we gained this. I mean, yes, thank you. At a time when it's been a hugely difficult time, not only for us but everybody else in the travel sphere. And let's hope that this time next year we're all back to where we were.